It's Tuesday, May 30th. This is Africa 54. Clashes subside in Sudan's capital on Tuesday after military factions battling for more than 6 weeks agreed to extend a ceasefire aimed at allowing aid to reach civilians. Americans observed Memorial Day on Monday, an annual holiday that honors those who died while serving in the U.S. military. The day is also celebrated as the beginning of the summer season. And in our health segment, a medical doctor discusses obstetric fistula, one of the most devastating and serious of childbirth injuries. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in Sudan, where clashes are reported to have subsided in Sudan's capital on Tuesday, though fighting could be heard in some areas. This follows an agreement between the military factions to extend a ceasefire aimed at allowing aid to reach civilians. The two rival groups have been battling each other for more than 6 weeks. The army and the paramilitary rapid support forces say they have agreed to extend a week-long ceasefire deal by 5 days just before it was due to expire late on Monday. The truce was brokered and is being remotely monitored by Saudi Arabia and the United States, which say it has been violated by both sides, but has still allowed for the delivery of aid to an estimated 2 million people. The fighting in Sudan has destroyed hospitals and medical care in the country, and patients who fled the conflict are desperate for treatment. In the absence of medical aid, a Sudanese pharmacist who fled Sudan in recent weeks is doing what he can, help other refugees at a camp in neighboring Chad. Henry Wilkins reports from Khartoum, Chad.
A month ago, Mohammed Adam gathered what medicine he could when he heard the Janjaweed, an armed group known for killing civilians, was about to storm his hometown of Tendelti in West Darfur. He says he loaded the medicine on a horse-drawn cart and rode the kilometre or so across the border to neighbouring Chad. Since then, he has set up a makeshift pharmacy in Khartoum, a refugee site where about 10,000 people live.
Mostly now we need help with items for children because they are getting sick with infections, diarrhea, coughing, and especially there are problems with measles. It's mostly children who are our patients.
He says he pays for the medicine his patients receive himself. Medina Ahmed Ishak has just arrived at the pharmacy seeking treatment for her baby, Abdul Razak.
My child is sick with malaria and has diarrhea. Any food we had to eat is gone, so now I don't have enough. I pray that my son becomes a doctor one day.
Since Sudan's conflict began on April 15th, Chad and aid groups have struggled to provide enough food for refugees to eat. Medical aid is scarce too, according to refugees. Inside Sudan, the healthcare system has all but collapsed. This video purports to show a hospital in Khartoum gutted by the fighting. Others in the city are said to have been severely damaged, along with hospitals in West Darfur where much fighting has taken place. The medical non-profit Doctors Without Borders said Tuesday that its medical facilities had been looted, while a staff member had already been killed in April in the fighting. It says the looting will have life-ending consequences for the Sudanese people. Amir El-Tom is the Assistant Secretary General of the Sudanese American Physicians Association. He says with the Sudanese government not functioning because of the fighting, his organisation is helping fund the running of some hospitals. A week-long ceasefire that began Monday should allow some medical aid to enter the country.
Some of the hospitals that have been shut down for various reasons are the largest in Sudan. Some of the tertiary hospitals that other states referred to. Basically, the fighting has to stop. Otherwise, one catastrophe after the other in different or various fields of medicine will ensue.
Adam says refugees need more help from the international community, however.
First, I ask all nonprofits and local communities to help the refugees because they really need it. They have no place to protect them from rain, which helps spread diseases. We are concerned about the spread of cholera, which could turn into an epidemic. It will be a catastrophe.
He says he's doing what he can with what little he has. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Kafrun, Chad.
Somalia's Al-Shabaab militant attacked a military base on the outskirts of Masagawa, a town located in the central part of the country, killing at least 17 people, according to residents. The attack comes just days after Al-Shabaab attacked a base housing Ugandan forces from an African Union peacekeeping mission in Bulamarel, 130 kilometers southwest of the capital, Mogadishu. The attack came days after Al-Shabaab attacked a base housing Ugandan forces from an African Union peacekeeping mission in Bulamarel, southwest of Mogadishu. For analysis on the threat posed by Al-Shabaab terrorists in the East and Horn of Africa, I'm joined live via Skype from Baltimore, Maryland, by Ruth Namatovu, an analyst on Africa, peace, security, and conflict at Johns Hopkins University. Ruth, welcome to Africa 54.
I'm welcome. Nice to have you.
So, Ruth, the peacekeepers from the East African forces have been in Somalia for years now. And the question on many people's minds is, why haven't they been able to defeat the Al-Shabaab terrorists?
What I have to tell you is that first, the war in Somalia is asymmetric. It's not a conventional warfare. So these forces are fighting an enemy that they can't see. So if you're fighting somebody that you can't see, it's very difficult to defeat this person. Al-Shabaab uses the asymmetrical warfare, whereby they have to use explosives to do maximum damage to whatever target that they attack. And after that, they melt into the population. And the population is not very much helpful in identifying this kind of people when they are asked, so that they can be gone after. And if they melt into the population, then you can't go to fight in an area that is full of civilians. So that makes the war very difficult to actually finish or defeat such agents.
So the peacekeeping mission in Somalia, formerly known as AMISOM, is now ATMIS, but they are preparing to leave Somalia by the end of 2024. What challenges would this pose for Somalia's government?
First of all, the exit of the African Union forces is conditions-based, meaning they can only leave when the conditions on the ground actually permit them to leave. The situation is Al-Shabaab is still very active, and it will need another whole lot of assessments before actually these troops are supposed to leave. So far, they are doing their security transition, handing over military bases to the Somali forces. Some of them are being held by the Somali forces, which is very good. But an actual testing of the Somali forces and their capabilities in the field to be able to take over when the African Union troops leave is still something that is lacking. So the actual departure will depend on that, if the forces can secure the forces. If they can't, then the troops will have to have their mandate extended to be able to at least defeat, they cannot defeat Al-Shabaab now, but they can degrade Al-Shabaab to the levels that are acceptable to enable the government run properly.
You know, given your expertise as a security analyst for Africa, what do you think it will take to defeat Al-Shabaab?
I don't think that Al-Shabaab can now be defeated via just a military option. It's high time now the government of Somalia and its partners began to think of reconciliation. The only challenge to this is that while the government of Somalia is willing to reconcile or negotiate with Al-Shabaab, Al-Shabaab is not ready to do so. They see the Somali government as a Western-backed, and they see any Western actors as intruders on their Islamic faith or an intruder into their country. So for now, they're not willing to negotiate. But I think the most important way forward now is to find ways of doing the back channel negotiation with Al-Shabaab. There are people who can reach out to these people and begin negotiating for peace, find out what they want, reconcile some of the communities within where Al-Shabaab actually works, or these people who work with Al-Shabaab. I think that is the immediate way forward. But the military option is not going to end the insurgency in Somalia right now.
Ruth, many thanks for your insight into Somalia's Al-Shabaab terrorist group. Ruth Namatovu is an analyst on Africa, peace, security, and conflict at Johns Hopkins University. In Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, authorities are implementing a plan to regulate the city's auto rickshaw taxis to ease traffic congestion while drivers call for reduced taxes. Abdulaziz Barrow spoke to people impacted by the regulation in Mogadishu, and Abdulaziz Asman in Washington produced their story, narrated by Salem Solomon.
These auto rickshaws, or bajajs as locals call them, are part of the daily transportation routine for thousands in Somalia's capital city, Mogadishu. But a new law designed to cut down on traffic will regulate what days the city's 50,000 rickshaw taxis can operate on the roads and limit them to a maximum of 15 days of driving per month. The idea is to separate the taxis into two groups.
It is a system to register more than 50,000 rickshaw taxis in Mogadishu in order to separate them and mark them into A and B categories, to reduce traffic congestion, to manage and to reduce the burden or strain they put on the city.
Abdullahi Bashir Aden is an auto rickshaw operator and supports the new plan. He's been in this business for 5 years, supporting his family of 10.
If we are divided into A and B, we will receive more income than we used to. So I welcome the move, and I would like the government to divide us. It's a good thing.
But Aden also says that if he can only operate his rickshaw half of the days in a month, the government should cut the high monthly tax he pays in half as well.
We pay $15 in taxes, and we work for 15 days. That doesn't work for us. We complied with the government's law, so we are requesting a reduction in taxes, possibly by half.
Authorities have not yet signaled whether they will honor some drivers' demand to cut taxes, but they say that taxes collected under the new plan are less than what was collected before.
The tax they used to pay was $30, but it was reduced to $15 in the last 2 to 3 years. So there's a big difference between what it was and what is now. The drivers also make a lot of money now than before. Their income has also increased.
In Mogadishu and the other cities across Somalia, auto rickshaw taxis are a significant source of employment for thousands of young people. While the new plan may reduce traffic congestion and security concerns, some say it could also lead to job losses. For Abdulaziz Barrow and Abdulaziz Usman, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
Kenya's President William Ruto welcomed Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Nairobi as the latter paid a surprise visit to the East African powerhouse. Lavrov's trip to Kenya comes on the heels of an African tour undertaken last week by his Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba, with the warring sides each seeking to bolster support on the continent. The two leaders discussed trade, investment and economic cooperation. Russia has ties with African countries that date back to the Cold War, when the Soviet Union cast itself as an anti-colonialist defender. A Russia-Africa summit, the second in the series, will be held in St. Petersburg from July 26 to 29.
The UN-Russia memorandum is not being implemented at all. We have possibilities to export farm products by bypassing the framework of the UN-Russia memorandum. But undoubtedly, if the UN Secretary General had managed to implement everything he was calling for and what was included in the memorandum, the impact on the food and fertilizer markets would be far more positive.
Lavrov, who has visited the African continent at least 3 times this year, said that less than 3% of the 30 million tons of grain exported under the Black Sea deal had reached the world's poorest countries. South Africa's leading opposition party said on Tuesday it had taken legal action to force the government to arrest Vladimir Putin if the Russian president were to attend a planned summit in the country. Tuso Kumalo has more from Johannesburg.
The decision by the Department of International Relations in South Africa to grant diplomatic immunity to delegates that are attending the BRICS summit in August have caused a lot of noise in the country. The Democratic Alliance, which is the main opposition party in South Africa, has gone to court to try and seek for an order that will compel South Africa to arrest President Putin if he dare comes to South Africa. It argues that South Africa is a signatory to the Roman Statutes, and of course a member of the ICC. It has an obligation to do that and to arrest the president and hand him over to the ICC. Of course, the department has responded saying the granting of the diplomatic immunity on the delegates is a norm that it always does for such big meetings, even the meetings that have happened in South Africa in the past. But the Democratic Alliance has disputed that, saying in 2015, former president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, was here in South Africa attending the African Union Summit when South Africa was expected to arrest him because he had a warrant of arrest issued by the ICC. The next time people heard that Omar al-Bashir had left the country, and the Democratic Alliance saying they don't want that to happen. They want to make sure South Africa is forced to act when President Putin arrives in the country. Tuso Kumalo for VOA News in Johannesburg.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni on Monday signed the anti-LGBTQ laws, which includes the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, drawing immediate Western condemnation. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday said the U.S. would consider visa restrictions against Ugandan officials and others for the abuse of human rights following the implementation of one of the world's toughest anti-gay laws. Blinken said he has instructed the State Department to update travel guidance to U.S. citizens and businesses over travel to Uganda. The measures follow President Joe Biden's condemnation of the Ugandan legislation. Let us know what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, an expert discusses obstetric fistula, one of the most devastating and serious of childbirth injuries. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, the United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, talks about the dire need for humanitarian assistance to the Horn of Africa. Uganda! Uganda! Also, the recently approved anti-homosexuality law in Uganda has activists worried about a domino effect on the continent. Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Zimbabwe's opposition is crying foul on Monday after many voters, including some senior politicians, said their names had been removed or misplaced on the voters' roll ahead of national elections. Zimbabwe's leading opposition party, the Citizens Coalition for Change, said the voters' roll made available for public inspection by election authorities seemed to be riddled with errors. A Libyan court on Monday condemned to death 35 jihadists convicted of fighting with the Islamic State group in the North African country during chaos that followed dictator Muammar Gaddafi's fall, according to an AFP journalist in the court. This was the first group of 320 alleged Islamic State jihadists to be tried and sentenced. Botswana wants to maintain its partnership with De Beers and is confident that ongoing negotiations for a new dam and sales agreement will succeed, while President Mokgweetsi Masisi's threats to walk away from the negotiations have fueled speculation that the government may end the relationship. A government spokesperson insists negotiations between the government and De Beers are ongoing. On Memorial Day, observed annually on the last Monday of May, Americans commemorate those who died while serving in the U.S. military. The day is also celebrated as the beginning of the summer season with family cookouts, a dip in the pool, or a trip to the beach. VOA's Penelope Pulu has more.
On Monday, the United States celebrated Memorial Day. For the holiday, U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris honored those who sacrificed their lives in America's wars. Biden laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery, a monument to service members killed in action whose remains could not be found or have not been identified. The president said Americans must never forget those who sacrificed their lives to protect their country.
Our troops have fought for our democracy and, if necessary, died for it. Today, their service and sacrifice, and that of their families, that goes far beyond those silent stones out there.
The annual National Memorial Day Parade, featuring military bands, marching units, and war veterans, is a long-standing tradition in Washington. Memorial Day is also a day of optimism, marking the beginning of the summer season in the U.S. Millions travel to reunite with family members or enjoy a weekend getaway. Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
Obstetric fistula is one of the most devastating and serious of childbirth injuries. An obstetric fistula occurs when a mother has a prolonged obstructed labor but does not have access to emergency medical care such as a C-section. An initiative aims to alleviate the pain and suffering of some women in Côte d'Ivoire in need of treatment with free surgeries and capacity building. For more insight, Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu spoke with Dr. Serine Magueye, professor of urology at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Dakar, Senegal, and chair of urology at the General Hospital of Grand Yoff.
Obstetric fistula is a communication between the urinary system and the female genital tract, and occurring, unfortunately, during childbirth. The main cause is obstruction of the blockage of the progress of the fetus on childbirth, and this could be prevented during the prenatal follow-up when the midwife or the doctor realize that the woman cannot deliver normally. And she should be referred to a center to have C-section. If not, unfortunately, when the fetus is the baby is not able to come out, there will be a compression of the bladder on the previous bone, and this will end up with a fistula. You can have other causes of fistula that could be iatrogenic, meaning instrumental, during any procedure, endoscopic, surgical, in the pelvic area, meaning gynecological, urological, or general surgery, and very rare cases, but unfortunately prevalent in some places in the world, like in the South African region, what we call the traumatic fistula, due to violence.
So what does a fistula treatment consist of? I know surgery is part of it.
Actually, when the fistula is constituted, the only treatment is surgery. The surgery can be very easy in the beginning, but if anybody not skilled enough will try to do it, unfortunately, it can end up to be an incurable fistula because the complication of the first attempt. So normally, only people who have been trained to do it should start this kind of surgery. As I say, it can be very challenging sometimes, but it's very exciting and very, very rewarding if really we allow these women, very, very, very poor and sometimes very isolated in the community, to recover their dignity.
Actually, that's one of the reasons you are in Côte d'Ivoire, taking part in a campaign to treat women who have developed this condition. Talk to us about this campaign in Côte d'Ivoire. What is it and why is it important?
Last August, when we brought in Côte d'Ivoire 14 surgeons from 12 sub-Saharan African countries to operate on 180 women with very complex fistula cases in 5 hospitals, and that initiative end up with a high-level dialogue with the First Lady of Côte d'Ivoire, Mrs. Dominique Ouattara. And from there, we decided to have an annual work plan that will build capacity throughout the country and to allow surgeons in any single hospital to be able to take care routinely of the patient who is suffering from obstetric fistula. Bodo was the first part of this initiative for this year. We are developing capacity for them to be able to take care of the patient. So this is the first stage. So at the end of this year, the objective is to have at any center where we can do fistula surgery, having someone at least competent to do it. And from Côte d'Ivoire, we're going to scale up to other countries.
What is needed for the complete elimination of fistula in Africa?
Prevention to reduce maternal mortality and morbidity, number one, because if one mortality, you have 16 complications. So number two is to increase surgeries because it's very low. We do about, in sub-Saharan Africa, 2,000 to 3,000 fistula a year. Or in some countries, 1,000 to 5,000 fistula patients waiting, and about 1,000 to 5,000 new cases every year. So the backlog is huge. So if we bring everybody on board, the surgeons, the urologists, the gynecologists, anybody serviceable, anybody who can be part of this and to contribute to increase the number of surgeries, will clean the backlog. And if you are efficient enough, we will have efficient prevention to not to have new cases. And not forgetting to have some strategies for social reintegration for those women who have been left behind for many years. They need to get to be more educated, to be economically independent. And in this regard, I think we can definitely think about eliminating obstetric fistula in sub-Saharan Africa.
That was Serene Magay, Professor of Urology at the University of Czech Anta Diop, speaking with Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at vuafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.